My name is Katja Zonking. I'm a fourth year PhD candidate in sport management and policy in the Department of Kinesiology, housed in the College of Education, the Mary Frances Early College of Education at the University of Georgia. And I'm going to present today my research on diversity inclusion at academic conferences in the field of sport management. And I'm going to share my screen now. So I hope you can all see it, which is the standard question, right? We asked in Zoom meetings or in Zoom classrooms. So the topic, and I'm going to try to really stay to within the 20 minutes. The topic was Inclusion and Diversity in Sports Academy, a cross-section analysis of attendees, characteristics, and demographics of sport management conferences in North America and Europe. My co-author is my major professor, Dr. Jeb Correa Rose Chipiata Thompson. Unfortunately, she won't be able to attend the 30-minute synchronous session because she will be in class actually during that time. So I apologize for that in advance. But we've been working together on this project that is still very much in process. So unfortunately, we'll be only sharing preliminary findings, basically an example of the first program that we were able to review in the time that we had so far. I'm currently working on my dissertation, and so, and also, I'm on the job market right now, so that's why I'm unfortunately not finished with the research, but it's still a very ongoing and very intriguing project. So here's just a little bit of an overview of what I'm gonna discuss for the next 20 minutes. I'll be giving you a contextual background. What's the aim of the study? What are our research questions that guided this research investigation? What is the significance of the study? What are we trying to contribute to the current public discourse and literature? What is so far the body of literature saying? What have they found so far? Then I will briefly give you an overview of the methods, the data collection procedures, and some preliminary findings, and discuss a little bit more in detail what that means in terms of theoretical and practical implications. And then what's next? Again, I apologize that this is not a completed research. It's still an ongoing project, but I hope this will still give you a great overview. And if you have any questions, I'll be there on February 11th to 12th, I believe, for 30 minutes to hopefully answer all your questions that you have, or maybe some great feedback, some constructive feedback on how to strengthen and make it even more meaningful. Because I know there could be some study limitations that I will definitely discuss and address here. So I'll be happy to hear any concerns, feedback, and questions. So I look forward to that. So in terms of contextual background, representation, of course, matters, right? So today was the inauguration of the first Madam Vice President, right? Who is a woman of color, a woman of in the United States of South Indian descent, and a Black woman. And so this is a lot of historic. There's a lot of history that has been made today, and so obviously what that means, it shows the next girls that are looking for role models. Hey, we are being represented. We see someone else out there, so we can do it too, right? So it really shows you when you see someone that looks like you in a certain position, you can do it too. It's very empowering. It's very uplifting to see your identity being represented. So representation is very important. It's grounded in culture and positionality. And it's not neutral. As Owen said in 1992, it's an act of power in our culture. It's being enforced through images and role models that build individual identities on personal and professional levels. And that's why academic conferences play such a central role, right? Not only for the development of novel scholars and very much established scholars, but also for representation, and that's why we think this is a very important topic. So the aim of the study is really to seek document conference demographics through examining the gender and race that is apparent in the examination of invited speakers, panelists, and planning committee members, and also to draw conclusions on the extent to which sport management conference are diversity represented. Because it is still a very much preliminary study, we only focused on the two very much um, surface level diversity categories, which is gender and race. As its second step, hopefully for future directions, we also want to look into sexual orientation, nationality, ethnicity, all those things that are obviously not so apparent to the eye. And of course, I mean, identity, gender identity is also not so clear. So that's obviously study limitations too. But really just to get a preliminary idea where we stand, it's really just a little bit of getting an assessment. Okay, now that we made history by electing the first vice president of color, as a female, a woman of color. Now we want to see where we're at in terms of academia, right? So, what are the research questions that guided the study? Basically, two major research questions. What is the demographic makeup of the leading sport management conference in the United States, Canada, and Europe? And we are obviously in one of them at COSMA. The other ones are ESM, NASM, NAS, NASM, and NASH. Those are the ones. Obviously, they have a lot of more. There's ASMA too. There's SMA. There is RLA, but the major ones that really basically that I also have experience with because I went to all of them. I think it's and that were the ones that we really focused on in ESM, NASM, NAS, and NASH, and then COSMA. And then the second question is, what are exclusionary techniques and practices at sport management conferences? So, what is the significance of the study? Why is it important to look at diversity and questions or equity matters for academic conferences, right? We're very progressive thinkers. That's what we think in academia. And I totally agree. Higher institutions are the place where we really foster critical thinking, where we really encourage students, faculty, staff, to really push boundaries, push challenges that challenge status quo, and really ask questions to, at the end of the day, to contribute to positive social change. So the significance of this study therefore lies in revealing the demographic characteristics of sport management conferences attendees, hence ascertaining the potential lack of gender, ethnic, and race diversity, and in providing evidence of exclusionary techniques and practices. What comes to mind in terms of practices, microaggression, feeling of exclusion, and then also problematic experiences at the conference or during the application process. As I mentioned before, we kind of realized that for the purpose of this study, we're only focusing on gender and race. Also, the significance also lies in the provision of implications for future conferences in removing limitations that impact career opportunities or aspirations of scholars, and in adding cultural responsive practices and diverse perspectives to the field of study of sport management through conference presentations. So, what's the previous literature saying to the topic, or what we know so far. Basically, first of all, I think that is something we all know. We all, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but that's one of the things that we learned when we first came into the program. Make sure to go to as many academic conferences as possible. So for the past 4 years of my program, I made sure to go to literally every important national, international conference to really share my research and to learn. That's the most important thing, to get the feedback from you fellow colleagues, PhD, doctorate students, master students, to really get the feedback and get some input. And I always appreciate every criticism, because I think that's the only way to learn. So obviously, academic conferences play a critical role in the career of a scholar, particularly for doctoral students, right? Novel faculty members and other emerging scholars. The extent literature identified key motivators for attending academic conferences. Those are networking, personal development, professional development, and education, cost, time, convenience, and the venue location of the conference. However, one of the things that are mostly being overlooked and under research is what are the characteristics, behaviors, and experiences of conference attendees. And so that's one thing that Mayor noticed, and also Leach and all. They noticed that those are the things that are being overlooked. So, what about women's representation in sport management? So, women's representation in academic faculty has generally significantly increased, actually. So, in 2013, 48% um, in the overall academia were women. However, the field of sport management has been kind of resistant to the growing trend in academia, according to Taylor and all. A study from Jones et al. Found that more than 66% of all academic sport management programs in the United States employed less than 40% of women faculty members. And I think that's 2018, I apologize. So that means 30% of the programs actually acknowledged that no women faculty were actually part of so there were no women part of the faculty, 30% of all programs. And likewise, for instance, NASM, there are only 37% of all members that identify as women. So obviously there is still a visible lack of women's representation in the field of sport management, which is not so surprising considering that, sports has a long history and tradition of being dominated by white men. And if you look at sport leadership, that's one of my research line of research. It clearly shows that there's still a huge lack of representation. So the two theoretical perspectives that kind of guided this study is critical race theory and feminist theory, both basically examining society and culture as they relate to the categorization of race, law, and power in the United States. Or for feminist theory, it really examines inequalities and gender related issues like what are the gender roles and uneven power relations, right? And so, for instance, for critical race theory, Tommy J. Curry defined critical race theory in the Encyclopedia Britannica, I apologize, in 2016 as the view that the law and legal institutions are inherently racist and that race itself, instead of being biologically grounded and natural, is a socially constructed concept that is used by white people to further their economic and political interests at the expense of people of color. So that's why this is important, because if you look, for instance, at representation again, if women of color or men of color are not able to present their research at national and international academic conferences, it can basically hinder their career aspirations, because oftentimes one of the things search committees look for is how many presentations were given at those conferences. So that is already one point of discrimination, basically. So that could definitely hinder and but conversely could also further white people's economic political interests, right, at the expense of people of color, as Tommy J. Curry said. So that's why it is a very important theoretical perspective for this study. And then feminist theory, since we're also looking at gender, it's important because basically the feminist theory attempts to describe and explain how gender systems work, as well as the consideration of normative and or ethnic issues such as whether society's gender arrangements are fair. Methods. So we use the cross-section analysis of sport management academic conference programs, and what we basically did, we collected data by reviewing the programs of academic sport management conferences that occurred in North America and Europe between 2017 and 2020. Again, it's an ongoing process, so we haven't finished yet reviewing. We're basically through a couple so far. One of them we will present here. And then again, gender and race composition, as well as other identifiers of conference attendees and organizers were reviewed. How did we, and before we go into more detail, how we basically reviewed it, just really quickly about the cross-sectional research design. So why did we decide to use that research design? As Brian said in 2004, it really is it represents data collection on subsets of a population in a given time period. So one of the strengths of the research design is used to describe characteristics like income, gender, race, and age that exist in a community, and basically has an observational nature and is basically a descriptive research that looks at correlations that may exist between variables. However, it does not determine cause and effect relationships between different variables. So that is the shortcoming. So those methods are often used to make inferences about possible relationships or to gather preliminary data to support further research and experimentation. And we believe that's exactly what it is for. This is a preliminary data to really support a further research project that will be of qualitative inquiry nature with semi-structured interviews with these conference attendees or organizers. So it is basically frequently used to determine prevailing characteristics in a population at a certain point in time, and for instance, it's used to determine specific factors might correlate with particular outcomes. So in terms of the data collection procedures specifically, again, we included the conferences ESM, NASM, NAS, NASH, COSMA, and basically obtained the programs from the conference or society website. If programs were not available online or are not available online since we're still collecting the data, organizing committee members will be contacted. If we fail to obtain a copy of the program, an alternative conference will be selected from the examiner period between 2017 to 2020. For each person, basically, we review the institutional websites and profiles regarding their gender and racial affiliation. So for each attendee, for each organizing committee member, we'll go and really do research to basically determine on a surface level, of course, the gender and the racial affiliations. But of course, as we all know, this is not always so clear and cut clear, right? So the presentation panels, award winners, members of the conference planning committees will be categorized to identify potential exclusionary techniques. However, what is excluded is pre and post-conference workshops and courses, as well as merely abstracts, because that does not really determine if the author actually attended the conference, right? So here are some examples of the findings. So the first program that we looked at was the ESM conference from 2020. That was a virtual conference, the 28th European Sport Management Virtual Conference. And here are our findings. So again, it's just the first step, right? So we looked at reviewers. Those were men, all white, and only 3 women, all white. Organizing committee members. We have a scientific committee that is pretty 50-50. You have 1 man, 1 woman part of it. You have the researcher board committee, 6 men, 3 women, only 1 non-white man. Best conference paper award, 3 men, 1 woman. EASM PhD student seminar, that is 50-50. But here, now we're talking about the real core of the research, right? Presenters. So there were 300 in total that presented. There were some that had multiple presentations. And male, white male, were 157, which is about 52%. You had about 79 white identifying or looking, because again, I did not go ahead and called everyone and asked them for their identity, of course. So they could say, I do not identify as white, right? So this is really on a surface level, very superficial. So for that number, it's 79 white female that were presented at EASM, which is 26%. And then you have non-white males that were at 39 that presented, which is only 13%. And then here is a bigger issue. Non-white women, only 25, which is 0.8% of the entire group of presenters. So obviously that is a problem, right? And then best paper award finalists, you have 2 female, 2 women, 3 men, 0 non-white male, 0 non-white female, 5 professors, and 0 doctoral students. So also another step could be to look at the contribution of doctor students, master students versus professors, right? How are they represented at conferences? So what are the theoretical implications? Since I'm running out of time, I'm actually over the time, I apologize. Findings are pretty consistent with previous literature on conference and other disciplines such as medicine, tourism, hospitality, and event management. Aurora and all, for instance, found that men outnumber women by an approximate ratio of 2-1, which I think is exactly what we found here, just for the first example of the EASM program. At academic medical conferences across multiple specialties and regions, May Frew pointed out the significance of female role models and the ability to build friendships and professional networks cannot be underestimated. That's why it is so important to see that we need to do something about representation. Equally important might be the role of emotion, social fun, interaction, career responsibilities, as well as safety concerns and harassment. Speaking engagements allow for academic recognition, increased self-confidence, and public speaking skills. Most importantly, academic conferences are critical for the promotion process, right? Hence, fewer speaking opportunities impede women and scholars of color in their professional progress and career. What does that mean? Practical implications. So what we can do is basically remove invisible barriers that may actually act as exclusionary practices. So how can we do that? Organizers could implement the following strategies. Prioritize a diverse speaker lineup when planning an agenda for the conference. Equitable set of keynote speakers that helps to advertise the conference as a welcome and inclusive space. Again, representation matters. Ensure to be intentional in your visual messaging. Conference websites should represent all identities, but beware of tokenism, right? You don't want to just show one person of color among 50 white women and men. So obviously you really want to be careful with that too. And then include a clear messaging of inclusion and diversity. And also as the organizing committee, you could review the existing conference policies pertaining to diversity and inclusivity. How much are we actually already policies that really speak to that really ensure that we're inclusive and equitable. And then also ensure that the conference time, venue, and location is accessible to all attendees. So Reach, they actually have a really great kind of like a guide on developing inclusive conferences. And I kind of like thought it would be helpful to share that with you. That's how basically we could look at how to make conferences more inclusive. And I think that's basically reflective of what I just said in terms of practical strategies. So potential study limitations, again, submitted abstracts were not excluded into the sample, which could actually also provide some valuable insights regarding barriers, right, or reason for women scholars or scholars of color to be excluded of a conference. Moreover, as the study intends to only look at program content and institutional websites, other factors that require more deeper inquiry might be associated with gender and racial disparities are potential overlook, right? As I mentioned, also it could be we could see something else that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a case, because we know gender is not necessarily so obvious these, as we learn more about different identities, there's not a binary system, right? I mean, that's a socially constructed system. So we think of transgender, we think of non-binary identities. So obviously that's something that we cannot necessarily take away from just looking at institutional profile, right? So that's for that. We need qualitative research. We need to actually interview the person to understand their identity, affiliation, their racial affiliation, their sexual orientation, their age, their ethnicity, their nationality. So it takes more than just a look at the program content and the institutional profile, or their website or their social media. So we understand that. This just should give us a little bit of an first look at what we have to do. And I think those numbers speak for itself, that there's work to do. But we do absolutely recognize the study limitations. And then also the cross-sectional research design cannot be differentiated with cause and effect, right? Cannot differentiate cause and effect. And also other variables may affect the relationship between fair cause and outcomes, and the type of research doesn't necessarily allow for infinitive conclusion about causation, right? So those are some of the study limitations. Future research, as I already mentioned, it would be really, really good. And I think I will definitely follow this. I really want to do more qualitative research. We want to do more qualitative research on really understanding the experiences of academic conference attendees, really through semi-structured interviews with those conference attendees, or focus group sessions, or qualitative research surveys. So this is something that we highly recommend for future studies, but this is also something we will definitely do moving forward. And then also to better understand the practical and theoretical implication of the lack of diversity and inclusion for the conference attendance and the field of study as well, it is important to do that, to do more qualitative research approach. Yes, and then also to give numbers meaning, right, and provide context is important to use a qualitative research approach for future research direction in that area. So what's next? Ultimately, the goal is to highlight the persistent racial and gender inequities in the academic field of sport management, well reflected in the demographic makeup of academic conferences that are key to a successful career in academia. Accordingly, such professional meetings can act as gatekeepers and hence need to be at the forefront of positive social change. And that's why we think this study is very important, even though it's very preliminary. We understand that. But we look forward to your feedback, the references, and your constructive input, concerns, questions. We really look forward to connect with you and hear your feedback, because we know this is it's very in the early stages, and we would love to hear your thoughts and reflections. So that's pretty much it. I apologize. I'm a little bit over the time, but I look forward to seeing you all on February 11th or 12th. I have to double check the schedule. I hope you guys have a good rest of your week and stay healthy and safe. And I'll see you guys in mid-February. Bye.